Hey there, welcome to SaaS Unbound, brought to you by saas.group. I'm your host, Anna Nadeina, and this is the show where we chat with inspiring founders and experts to get an inside scoop on how they made their business success. And today with me is István Csanády, CEO and founder of Shaper 3D, the world's most intuitive modeling app for iPad, Mac, and Windows. They're VC backed, have won the Apple Design Award, and are on a mission to make CAD innovative and simply great. Super exciting to have you here, István.
Thanks for having me, Anna. It's great to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, actually, it's my colleague who I have to thank for the introduction. When he first came up to me and said, "Hey, you want an intro?" I was like, "Oh, of course, sure." I was so excited, and then I was like, "Okay, this is a new industry for me," and I went to the website, of course, started my research, and I realized that I actually used it. So I have a funny story. When I got married, I realized that my husband has a workshop at the garage with all kinds of tools for woodwork, including like all the like super difficult, hard to operate machines. And of course, I had to, get my hands there. So I started researching like how do I make it all work, and I wanted to create a lamp, and obviously like it turned out I needed a design, and all the tools that I tried to research and use were like super difficult. And then the one I ended up using was actually Shaper 3D. I had to abandon the project like after, because I realized that once you create a model, then you have to find wood, and then you have to work on it, and then you have to. So it's a lot of work.
Yeah. It doesn't make itself. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yes, but yeah, a funny.
That's the hard part, actually.
Right. So funny enough, I used it. Very interesting. But and this is going to be one of my questions. I'm just a totally like out of nowhere coming to your website and eventually using it, kind of not even a customer, just a user. Does it happen a lot? Like, do people just stumble upon Shaper 3D and just use it for like amateur projects, or are you mostly for professionals?
I'd say that we are mostly focusing on professionals, but we are getting a lot of non-professionals too. So, like for the needs of our professional customers, define our roadmap and our product strategy. But the ease of use and the intuitive nature of Shaper 3D has this side effect that our product is loved by non-professional designers too, not just by professionals. And we have a very significant hobbyist, prosumer, maker user base too. Most of them are obviously using the free version of Shaper 3D, and among our paying customers, the majority of our revenue is coming from professional users.
Okay. All right. So I'm just I'm the smallest part of your user base. Okay. So let's
That's
get
not
back
entirely
to.
true. So like you're a bigger part of our user base, but a smaller part of our paying customer base.
Oh, okay. Interesting. All right.
Yeah. So we have a lot of free hobbyists. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't call myself even that. But let's get to the beginning. Can you talk a little bit about your background? How did you get here in the first place?
Sure. Yeah, I think I told this story probably 1,000 times before, because this is a big part of when you are raising around. Like this is a big part
Right.
of the story and the pitch, like how you got here. I'm in a very lucky position that, to me, it kind of feels like that I was trained in my entire life to do this, like build this particular company. So I started coding when I was 6 years old. My brother wanted to be a software engineer, and he taught me how to write code. Eventually, he became an architect, because in the end of the 1990s, he was told that there are already too many software engineers out there. so he should not become
Oh,
a
yeah.
software engineer. So he became an architect because like you always need architects. And then so he became an architect, and then I learned CAD from him. He's like 10 years older than I am, and I was just sitting next to him on Saturdays, and I was watching him using traditional CAD tools, and I just learned how to use CAD and 3D graphics applications from him when I was a teenager. And then so I had these two hobbies, like nerdy hobbies, when I was growing up, and then when the iPhone was launched, I was already, well, an Apple fanboy, more or less. I got the first iPod from my dad for Christmas, and I fell in love with it. So I was following the story of Apple with great excitement. And I still remember that when I was watching the iPhone keynote, and I just got like so excited. It felt like that, oh, like I've just seen what the future will look like. And I immediately, like, started thinking about like how to build something for these new devices, how the future will look like. And by the time the iPhone SDK did not exist, right? So it was a completely closed ecosystem by the time the App Store was a couple of years away, or a year away. And we didn't really even have like the hope that we can ever build applications for this new device. But a few months later, a group of really enthusiastic hackers came up with a jailbroken SDK for the iPhone, and then you suddenly got access to this new device, and you could build basic applications for the iPhone. So I immediately started building apps for the iPhone, and then a year later, when Steve Jobs announced the App Store and the official SDK, I started building my own app with a friend of mine. We were still like university students, and we spent our entire summer building our first app in the first in the summer, and our first app was in the App Store just 3 weeks after the App Store was launched. So it was like one of the first, I don't know, like 1,000 applications in the App Store, and we made like $20,000 or something like that, which was an awful lot of money for two university students, right? Like it's a lot of money. And and that was the first time when I felt that, hey, you can actually build software and make money by building software. And that was a very, very exciting experience. And so a few years later, I spent a few years at an enterprise SaaS company. I didn't really enjoy that environment, so I eventually quit my job, and I decided to start my own company. And like the choice was quite obvious. Like for me, it was like there was CAD, there was the evolving Apple ecosystem. There was this very stagnant industry that really did not change for 30 years. And there was my excitement about the manufacturing software industry. And and I just combined all of these, and this is how Shaper got started, basically. It originally started as a pet project, as a side project. And I was just playing around with a 3D geometry engine that I ported to iOS in a few months, and then it evolved to something more when the first rumors about the iPad Pro came out in 2014. I immediately quit my job because I thought that, oh, hey, this is an exciting opportunity. Apple is going to launch a new platform, and the rumors were saying that the iPad Pro was going to be a completely different iPad. It's going to be much more powerful. It will have a different input device, the Apple Pencil, and I thought that, hey, this can be a platform shift. This is something that can actually transform how we think about our computers, or at least it's going to introduce a new device category. We could reinvent CAD for these new type of devices. So I quit my job, and then it turns out that Apple slipped with the development of the iPad Pro, so they did not release the iPad until the end of 2015. So I just bootstrapped the company or bootstrapped the project for 18 months or 2 years, and I burned all my savings during that time. I almost went bankrupt by the end of those couple of years. I literally had like a couple of weeks of personal runway left. I had like $200 on my bank account or something like that. And then Apple announced the iPad Pro finally. And then I texted one of the prominent local angel investors, and he saw the opportunity in Shaper, and he invested just $50,000, and that's how Shaper 3D started. Like, that's the long story short.
Okay, that's a perfect script for a Hollywood movie, like a startup founder. Awesome. All right, I really like it. But I've got a few questions. So first of all, I mean, having a nerdy hobby usually pays off. Like what I learned from the podcasts. I mean, this is super cool, right? And it's one thing like having a nerdy hobby and just being good at it, and a totally different thing, applying it on something that that can earn you money and something that can scale. And this is what you did. And by the looks of it, pretty successfully. Another thing. And something you said, and something that I compare my own experience with, you said you told this story 1,000 times to the investors. And what I've heard from investors while I was pitching, someone would say, never tell your personal story, like how you came to building a product, unless you're like changing the world or curing cancer. So okay, how do you feel about it? And
I don't know. My personal experience is quite the opposite. Like, usually, like if you're not telling the story, like the second question is that, like, what's the story? Like, I think that the story is probably the most important if you are building something ambitious, right? But if you're not building something ambitious, then you just shouldn't raise money. Because building something ambitious requires enormous drive. And it requires such a drive that it has to last for a decade. Because building something that is like eventually going to be big, and by big I mean like a multi-billion-dollar company that defines an industry, that's something that you cannot build overnight. Especially if you are building something that is like really, really complex and has enormous depth and breadth. So like, CAD is one of these industries where products are enormously complex and technically it's extremely challenging to build something like a CAD system. But obviously it's not the only industry. Just think of Webflow, for example. Webflow is one of my favorite companies. I think in many ways they are similar to Shaper. And like for the founder, for Vlad, it took a lot of time to build even like a very small MVP of their product, and it's still they're still improving the product a lot every month. It's and like when you're building something like this, when you're building something ambitious, something that when you are actually serious about disrupting an industry and building an industry defining company, that doesn't happen overnight. That takes like 10 years, 15 years. And for that, you need something that is just forcing you through that decade to just to pursue greatness and pursue like this unbelievably ambitious goal. And if you don't have that, right, and that drive somehow always goes back to your background, like how you grew up, what you're excited about, right? And that's the most important thing.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. I mean, for me too. Like, how do you know this problem? How you're related to it? Because it's one thing to just try and take something that maybe needs improvement and people are ready to pay for it, and it's another thing when you've experienced this. But okay, so you learned CAD when you were a teenager, right? How did you know that it needed improvement? And how did you know that you are going to change the industry? And CAD is not just a design tool, right? It's also a documentation tool, but you're kind of, as far as I know, moving away from this.
Yeah, actually, it's like traditional CAD. I would say it's like traditional CAD systems are much more focusing on documentation than design. Or original, the reason why CAD systems were created in the 1980s, 1990s, what we call CAD today, these tools were replacing drafting, 2D drafting, like manufacturing documentation. So like the design work was not supposed to happen necessarily in CAD. It was more like about documentation. Yeah, and certainly like that was part of our strategy in the early years of Shaper. That we realized that you can't just build a full-featured traditional CAD competitor from scratch, because it takes, well, it's hard to tell how long, but it takes like I think like 6 to 10 years to build a CAD system.
Right.
Like an actual CAD system, even an entry-level CAD system. And there are like no shortcuts, really, like there are no shortcuts. So until you get there, you have to find an adjacent use case that is meaningful and useful enough for your target audience, so that you know, like it keeps you going until you get to that point where you can actually position yourself as a replacement tool. And that adjacent use case for us was conceptual design, prototyping, ideation, sketching, the early stages of the design process. And basically in the last 6 years, we have been adding more and more and more to Shaper, so that we are covering more and more and more of the entire design process. And I would say that we're still not a full-featured CAD system. There are still many, many feature gaps that we have even today compared to an entry-level CAD system. But in many ways, we are much better than a CAD system, because for certain use cases, we can just do things that a traditional CAD system cannot do, right? And it's a long list of things that we can do that traditional CAD cannot do, that our customers find extremely valuable and using Shaper 3D together with their legacy tools. And but we are working really, really hard to be able to tell our customers in a couple of years that, hey, like, here is Shaper, and now you can do most of your job in Shaper without switching to another tool in the end of the ideation, sketching, prototyping phase. And you know, it's not something that happens overnight. This is something that, and there isn't like a step function that, hey, suddenly we implemented this or that feature, and oh, hey, like now we can replace like a traditional CAD system. Because it's, first of all, this industry is extremely horizontal, extremely complex, has enormous depth. So you can get there, but it takes a lot of time, and you have to build step by step, function by function, vertical by vertical, and then you will get there. But it takes a lot of patience and a lot of upfront investment before you can harvest the fruit of your hard work.
Okay. All right. And okay, we came back a little bit to the investment again, right? So how did you raise money? You said that you went to the angel investor first. Did it get easier from that point when you were able to show a product that's already grew a little bit? And did you go to people that knew CAD industry or were somehow adjacent to that?
Yeah.
Or you just went to pretty much whoever would listen?
Yeah. So I raised several rounds. And the first one was an angel round, 50K in 2016. Then we raised a pre-seed round in 2016 again, from an Austrian venture fund, Speedy Invest. And then we raised a seed round from a British investor team, in Reach Ventures, $1.3 million in 2017. Then we raised a Series A, $6 million. That was a small A round in 2019. And then we raised a small B round, $40 million from the Series A investors and EBRD. So I have a long list of investors. We have EBRD, Point Nine Capital, Creandum, in Reach Ventures, Speedy Invest. We have a lot of smaller angel investors, individuals who invested in Shaper. And I was very like lucky, I think, and I was also very intentional about like how we raise money over time. And first of all, I was very lucky because we dodged this bullet from the last couple of years when valuations were sky high, completely unreasonable, right? And we did not raise during that insane period of time because we didn't really need money, to be honest. Like Shaper historically has been always an extremely cash efficient company. So we are well above 10 million ARR, and we raised like $22 million. And out of that $22 million, most of it is in the bank, and we are barely burning any money. So that's unusually cash efficient growth. So fortunately, we managed to dodge this bullet that many companies did not manage to avoid in the last couple of years, that we did not raise at 50x ARR, 100x ARR valuations. And like during those 2 years, raising money was very easy. Like basically anyone could raise any money almost with some basic fundraising skills. Yeah, it's not a good thing actually. I'm not sure if that's. I don't think that's a good thing, to be honest. It's like it sounds good. It's not. It's really not. It's not good for anyone. Eventually, it's not good for companies. It's not good for investors. It's not good for anyone. And also we went through this roller coaster of fundraising that in 2016, 2015, it was really hard to raise. There was like a small downturn around that time. Then it got easier and easier until like 2021, when it got like not just easy, but like really like insanely easy. And then it got like really hard. And I raised in 2016 when it was quite hard. We raised in 2019 when it was still sane, but much easier than in 2016. And then I raised when it got extremely difficult after the downturn. And I would say that fundraising is, like the complexity of fundraising is a dependency of two things. First one is that how quickly you are growing and how investable your company is. That's the most important thing. And the other very important thing is the macroeconomic environment, right? And that's completely out of your control. And the macroeconomic environment, I would say it's a bigger factor in fundraising than anything else. And that's that's something that's completely out of your control. You cannot really predict when the next downturn is coming. I mean, you can, but maybe not with 100% confidence. And so I think that the best advice is that you can get about fundraising is that you should be default alive, and by default you should not need venture capital, and venture capital is a great catalyst for growth, but don't think of it as as your lifeline. It's because it should not be your lifeline. This philosophy was not very popular in the last few years, unfortunately. The startup industry, if that's I'm not sure if that's a thing, but the startup industry or venture capital in general completely lost its sense, and you could say that the way how we looked at venture capital, I mean not as Shaper, but the way how startups looked at venture capital was not healthy. It was not a healthy relationship, and but things are normalizing a bit, and now we are getting back to a much more pragmatic approach, I think.
Right. And obviously, like when you raise the first round, maybe the second round, your personal story is important, right? Because they want to see that, you're super passionate about the project. Is it still the case when you're raising round A, round B, or there are different metrics, and you're obviously passionate because you've been carrying on for a while successfully, but what's the most important metric at this point that investors are looking for?
I think you're right that probably in the earlier stages, storytelling is more important, and as the company matures, metrics become more important, right? But it's always somehow the combination of the two. And like metrics are important, but they always hide certain things, right? Like they hide the substance of the company. They hide the deeper meaning of the company, if there is any, right? Maybe not every company has a deeper meaning. Some companies have a deeper meaning. So I think both are important. But at a seed stage startup where there are no customers, maybe you have a crappy prototype, or maybe not even that. You just have an idea and you're trying to raise money. That's mostly about storytelling, right? And yes, for like a Series B company or a Series B plus company, it's mostly about metrics, and those are the things that matter the most. But it also depends, obviously, on the investor's preference and the investor's mentality, right? Investors are human beings too, and human beings love stories. Some investors value stories more than other investors. So it really depends on who you're talking with, right? And eventually, venture capital is a relationship business. So like building relationships is extremely important, especially when capital is scarce. And that's like a good way of building a relationship is to tell an amazing story.
Sure. Okay, so let's move on to your customers, because that's also something that you mentioned, right? Your customers shaper. This is something I noticed just creeping around the website a bit. You are actually answering the questions on the forum yourself, right?
Yeah.
So what part of your job is communicating with your customers and actually making the decisions, right? Because for me, Shaper is a pretty big company already, right? In my head, I would kind of think that you would outsource this, right? There will be product manager, project manager that you would have this do, but it's actually you. So it's really interesting. What role does customer communication play in your roadmap for Shaper?
Yeah, I think I hate generalizations, right? So like I'm going to say things like they were the ultimate truth, but I don't think that there's such thing as the ultimate truth. Like this is really just my experience. But I think that many founders, as they scale, they stop doing certain things that they should have never stopped doing ever, like really. And like one of them is obviously like customer interactions. That's like, well, venture capital is not your lifeline. Customer interactions are.
That's going to be my quote.
That's
Loved it.
like really like customer interactions is that's how you eventually understand your business. You can look at all the metrics. You can like read a summary from a user researcher, from a customer interview. You can like do whatever you want. They're really the most juicy stuff, the most exciting stuff, the pivotal things, right? The things that will transform your thinking around your business. You will hear those things in like when you're personally interacting with customers, ideally in a relatively intimate way, especially if you're doing it in like personally, right? If you
Right.
if you have a call with them, if you visit them, like that's how you learn the most. So that's something that I think like a founder or a CEO should never stop doing. And I think that there are many great examples for that from many different companies. One of my favorite ones that I've recently read about is that Dara K, the CEO of Uber, used the Uber driver app for like a longer period of time to understand the struggles that their drivers have. That's like that. I think that's an amazing example. Another thing that I do personally quite a lot, and unfortunately I stopped doing it for a while, and it was one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made. Is I'm still interviewing candidates quite a lot, and fortunately more and more and more. I think that's also something that you cannot ever completely delegate, because you're building a software company. Software company is really nothing more than a bunch of people. A software company doesn't really have anything, right? It's like we don't have a factory, we don't have physical goods. We have IP, but like even IP is worthless without people who can develop it. So yeah, I think there are many things that you should never stop doing by yourself, and this like this ivory tower CEO who is delegating everything and completely like not hands on, and just like this theoretical operator who is just a resource allocator. I think that's, in reality, no successful CEOs are like that. Like none of them, right? None of them.
Right.
And you just have to set your priorities, and you have to allocate your time accordingly. I think it's much easier to delegate operational stuff when you are hands-on with the most important areas. And I tend to be hands-on with hiring. I tend to be hands-on with product. I tend to be hands-on with customer interactions. I think these are enormously valuable activities and inputs that you can get.
Right. Oh, it was on the other podcast when they asked, like, will it be ever possible to substitute customer communication with like ChatGPT or any other AI bot? And the founder told me, it's easier to substitute lawyers with ChatGPT than customer support. So. Okay.
I get the sentiment. I get the sentiment of that statement. I think it's not entirely true. I think some kind of customer interactions can be automated with AI really well.
Right.
Some of them, but like building relationship building is not something that you can do with AI.
True. Okay. So what was the biggest revelation that came from a customer? Do you remember? Something pivotal.
There were many. Like I think that the first one was cannot even remember the first one. So like I had a lot. Like one of the most important ones, or maybe like most remarkable ones, was maybe in 2017 when I was watching a usability test of our onboarding, and the guy was going through our user onboarding process, and he was struggling a lot, and I was just standing there watching him, and I just had this picture in my mind that, holy crap, there are thousands of people every day downloading the app, and all of them are struggling like this guy. And that's like, oh, okay. And I was like, okay, now we have to stop everything, and we will need to invest more in onboarding. And that was definitely a pivotal moment for the company. So that was a point where we really polished or invested a lot in polishing our onboarding process. And that was a very high ROI investment, and that turned out to be the right decision by the time. That's I still remember the pain watching him going through the onboarding, and like, why don't you press that button? Like, this is not how we imagined this user flow, this user experience. Like, so like, but this is like a more formal customer interaction, right? So, and not, but. When you're watching someone using the product on a usability test, but informal ones are equally insightful, or maybe even more insightful, when you understand like a customer workflow, like why they do what they do, and how they actually do it, what makes the product valuable for them, what is it that they actually like really want in a product, and really appreciate in a product, how they think about like why they think that your price is low, or why they think that your price is high, just by like changing.
I read that
some
thread on your forum.
Which one?
About the prices.
Oh yeah, so that's we have a lot of hobbyist users. We love them, we really do, but unfortunately it's enormously hard to come up with a price that works for them and also works for our business customers, right? So we are always trying to have a balance, but unfortunately for many hobbyists, even like $10 a month would be too high. So it's and we are getting a lot of feedback on that, because obviously, like in terms of volume, hobbyists are the larger user base of Shaper 3D. In terms of paying customer base, they are a much smaller fraction, and that's one of the trickier things that we never really managed to figure out, to be honest, like how to create a pricing model that works both for hobbyists but also doesn't cannibalize our business customers. We spent a lot of time with that, and we didn't really manage to figure it out.
Yeah, but you're trying. That's that's what matters. But then, of course, like obviously, the pricing thing is just one in a pool of many requests that you're probably getting from your customers and users. So how do you make sure you're building something that really matters, and how do you make sure that you are still able to say, we're not going to address that just yet. We are trying, like with pricing, but hold on.
Yeah. Basically, the question is like how we create our product roadmap, right?
Right. Like, how do you prioritize like what's being built and what's just, nice to have, but maybe not going into production?
It's the art and science of product management, right? The scientific part is that we do a lot of user research. We have 3 user researchers working on understanding existing customers' needs and potential future customer needs. We also have a significant product design team that spends a lot of time with better understanding what our customers want and how they use the product. We have usage analytics. We understand how our customers statistically using Shaper and what are the features that they use the most, what are the features that they discover or cannot maybe even find in Shaper. So we have a lot of quantitative information and qualitative information that we turn into quantitative information. This is the scientific part. And then comes the less scientific part, which is really like, it's the art of product management, which is your gut feeling and like how you incorporate your vision and how you incorporate your strategy into this quantitative information. Because if product management was purely like solely a quantitative discipline, that it would be very easy, right? Like that's not the hard part. The hard part is like you need to have taste, like good taste for like, which is called product sensibility in product management. You have to have good product sensibility to understand how to balance between the vision and between the quantitative inputs that you have. And that's enormously hard. That's where that's where you need a fantastic product leader or fantastic product managers or amazing product designers who deeply understand your customers and have this amazing intuitive like gut feeling that how to balance between these two. And I don't really have a great answer to like how to incorporate your product sensibilities into your product roadmap. It's a discipline. It's a skill that you learn over time, and you learn by failing and sometimes succeeding.
Right. So there is no magic pill that gets you the next best feature.
No, there isn't.
All right.
No, if there was, it would be very easy, right? So if product management was, then ChatGPT would be able to do it. And I'm pretty sure that some parts of product management will be replaced by ChatGPT, but certainly not all of them.
Right. And well, that was supposed to be my last question, but I will ask it now. So, ChatGPT, AI, right? Obviously, everyone's super excited, and Replit just launched this new AI program where you can just basically talk to your phone, right, and tell it to build an app, and it
Hmm.
builds it, right?
Yeah.
Are you addressing any of those trends, and should we expect Shaper 3D to have some kind of something like this in the future? Okay, I'm not telling anybody.
Not everybody, but like a few thousand people, right?
Yeah.
I cannot deny nor confirm that we have
Okay.
something in the pipeline. So obviously, I'm an avid ChatGPT user, and I'm quite, to be honest, I still I'm having a hard time believing that this is actually happening. Like a year ago, if you had told me that, hey, István, you're going to have ChatGPT, no way, right? I would not have believed it. Like it was in the like. Do you remember, or not just ChatGPT, but all this generative AI stuff? Like, um, do you remember the TV series CSI, where they
Oh yeah.
yeah, and like everyone, like it was a meme that people were laughing on the computer scientist who just told the computer enhanced, and then suddenly the
Yeah.
picture became like like much higher quality and much higher resolution, and oh, like then they managed to identify the suspect, right? And it was like hilarious. It was a joke,
Yeah.
right? And it's like quite literally happening, and not just with image processing, but also with like more like general AI stuff. That's quite unbelievable. I think the implications are still unclear, right? Is this going to be bigger than the internet, right? Or smartphones? Is this going to favor incumbent companies or startups? Is this going to impact everything or just a few areas of white collar work, right? So it's not clear yet what the implications are, and I think that it will probably take a few years to learn what the implications are. But I'm certainly super excited, and we are looking into many different ways how we could apply these new technologies in the world of design and manufacturing software. I think there's a lot of opportunity here to make our customers' lives easier, remove a lot of friction from their workflows, and completely automate many different repetitive tasks that otherwise would like take them hours every single day. So we are very excited about it.
Right. Oh, I think it's the best case scenario. Like, it doesn't, because everyone's talking on one hand about ChatGPT and AI taking our jobs and everything, and on the other hand, the fact that ChatGPT is not creative, right? So taking away the
Is it not?
mundane tasks.
Yeah.
Okay, that's another conversation. I had a podcast go on for another 40 minutes just because of that question. So, but yeah, taking the repetitive tasks, like you were saying, off someone else's day, I think it's brilliant. Okay, what are you using it for? How do
For
you
me,
stretch its
yeah.
creativity?
So for me, it replaced Google mostly. I'm barely using Google anymore. Um, most and I frequently find myself starting to type in something to the search bar in my browser, and then I realize that, oh, I mean, this will take me probably like 10 minutes to find in Google. I will just ask ChatGPT, and this is happening more and more frequently, especially with GPT-4. to be honest, like I'm finding higher quality answers than and faster than I can with Google. That's one use case. The other use case is that when there is a topic that I want to explore, and I would have to read a lot about it, and instead of reading a lot about it, I learn by like turning ChatGPT to my personal expert and just learning about the topic and asking ChatGPT about it. Like how uh, last week I was learning about inbound sales tactics, and I mean I could read everything on SaaSter, and I did actually, right? And I could watch 100 hours of videos, or I can just like take the shortcut and ask very specific questions to from ChatGPT. And I'm not saying that obviously it's not going to replace completely reading all the SaaSter posts. Obviously, I'm still reading it, but it's definitely accelerating my learning, and it makes me look for the right things, and it like expands my horizons. So it's like it's an enormously helpful tool that saving me at like 10-20 hours a week at least.
Right. Oh yeah, I actually absolutely agree about making it ask making me ask the right questions, because it makes the mistakes that keep me unsatisfied, and then I go in with more questions and more questions, and it just get to the bottom of it, and sometimes to the answers that I never really expected, which is super cool.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's to me it's an integral part of my workflow for sure.
Okay, so next time I'm making a lamp, let's hope Shaper 3D has this saying that you can just tell it, make a lamp. Hopefully it does everything else.
That actually, so that's where I think actually ChatGPT and generative AI is not going to be as great as it is in other areas, solely because in engineering, something that looks like or almost like the actual solution, it doesn't work. Like in manufacturing and engineering, it has to be the thing, right? That the exact thing that you have in mind. It's something that is almost like what you want. It's just not good enough, unfortunately, because it will cost you a fortune because you're not going to manufacture the right part. So, and these statistical models are going to be extremely helpful in accelerating a lot of parts of the design and manufacturing and engineering workflow. But I think this use case where you're generating a part based on a textual description, I don't think that's going to happen, or at least not the way how we imagine it based on the current generative AI solutions. But it's definitely going to accelerate the workflow a lot. But it's not going to like make you the part.
All right, so we're getting to the original question. If we were expecting a similar solution from Shaper 3D. See, yeah. I was asking the right questions. Okay, and so the last question is something that I ask all founders out there. What's so far the biggest win and the biggest failure, or if not a failure, the biggest challenge?
Oh, that's very broad. The biggest failure. The biggest failure was, I think, when we did lower the bar a little bit in hiring during the pandemic. We went full remote for like 18 months. And we diluted our culture a bit. I wouldn't say it was not irreversible, and it was not like it's not the end of Shaper, but it was not the end of Shaper, but it was not worth it. Like you should never compromise with company culture and hiring bar, because just never works out. Never. And I knew it. I knew this before the pandemic. Somehow during the pandemic, somehow during this fully remote period of time, I would just forget about it. I forgot about it. And we learned a lesson. And now we have the exact same very high hiring bar that we had before the pandemic. But that was definitely a mistake to ever lower it,
Okay.
even just a little bit. You should actually raise the bar every single year. Jeff Bezos was right about it, and I think this is how you should think about it. And it just never works out.
Right. Okay. Well, makes sense. What about the win?
The win, I think the win is that eventually we did not screw up our company culture, and we have a fantastic team that is super ambitious, hardworking, excited about the vision and the mission, and they work really, really hard to turn this company into an industry defining generational company. And probably that's the biggest win. I think that eventually, like if you build a company, obviously it has certain financial implications, but it doesn't really matter, because eventually if you look back, like after a decade or a couple of decades, the money is not the thing that will be the most exciting about your company. The most exciting thing about your company is going to be all the relationships that you build, the time that you spent with your team, all the successes that you achieved, all the failures that you went through together. The story, it's the story that matters eventually, right? And I think that we are very, very fortunate that we have this team that is going to be, I think like these few years that we spent together, I think for most people who are here, it's going to be a fantastic memory until the end of their lives. And probably that's the biggest thing that we have ever had.
That's perfect. That's amazing. And that's a great trend. I mean, honestly, most of the founders that come to the podcast say that the biggest win is the team, and the biggest pride moment is the team. So that's a beautiful thing that I noticed. Well, thank you so much. I mean, by the looks of it, you're building something really great, and you're doing it with the best people possible. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what's next, how you maybe incorporate AI into Shaper 3D, and all the best.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, István. Take care.